I would like to insist on some key risks which investors should really take into account in their strategies. The first issue I'd like to mention, particularly considering that the global recovery is hardly taking place at the pace which was expected. The first thing is the exit strategies. How to implement exit strategies, particularly when it's politically quite sensitive. To which extent implementation of exit strategies have to be gradual. To which extent they can harm fundamentals when fundamentals are good, not to mention countries in which fundamentals are not that good. Second risk I'd like to mention is the food prices. It seems that it's a long-term trend now that food prices are increasing. We had been observing in past years some riots in quite a number of countries that might occur again. Now, maybe the major risk I would consider is the fact that, yes, growth is taking place in many countries, but what type of growth? We hardly observe diversification of the economies. Industrialization has really not taken place. To some extent, services, yes, are developing themselves, but really, I would say, in the added value chain, basically, Africa remains quite in a backward type of economies. So the specialization of the economy remains very remarkable. The dependence of commodities in most countries is a key factor. Now, beyond the crisis recovery, those are long-term. There are quite a number of structural problems that have to be highlighted. Number one, in many countries, there is a problem of political and economic governance. This is particularly the fact in least developed countries. And I would just like to remind that among the 49 least developed countries, 33 are from Africa. I would also remind that next year there will be the UN Least Developed Countries Conference number 4. And if we analyze the plan of action of the UN 3, which took place in 2001 in Brussels, I would say that the progress have not been that remarkable. So this conference on least developed countries will take place next year, mid-June or somewhere like that, in Istanbul. And this will be a major event for many African countries. Key issue is really infrastructure. Infrastructure is really the major problem in the short term in practically all fields. Here we mentioned transport, energy, water, sewage, but it can be airports, it can be ports, and so on. Skills transfer, and skills transfer can go along transfer of technology. Now, a major issue, if you look at regions, I mean, out of Africa, for example, as the ASEAN, you will observe that even if it's not going that fast, there is a process of convergence of economic policies. There is a process of increase of enhancement of the trade flows. But in Africa, the barriers have to be reduced, and the regional integration is certainly not occurring very fast. Access to capital is also a big problem in the sense that the domestic capital market is not very developed. We can only mention the cases of South Africa and Nigeria, but access to capital, and particularly in local currency, is a major problem. Not to mention combat inequalities, and when we talk about inequalities, we have inequalities between region, coastal areas, inland, between urban and rural areas, between gender, so all type of inequalities. And what now matters a lot and is constantly repeated in the international fora, the domestic resource mobilization has to really far more take place. Well, I would just like to show this map because, well, maybe sometimes we know that Africa is vast, but do we realize that Africa is as big as the United States, India, Argentina, Western Europe, Scandinavia, and China? So this is quite a huge continent, which means that it matters, particularly considering that the population is growing quite fast. It is very often said by quite a number of transnational, maybe Brazilian, but also other transnational, that if large-scale farm investment take place in a big way, that could turn Africa into mini-Brazil. We are sometimes a bit concerned with this vision, in the sense that this entails quite major environmental and social concern that may create a lot of problems regarding land tenure, that can create a lot of problems regarding social cohesion, regarding migration. So yes, these could take place to 25. I see that as a little bit maybe optimistic, but what are the risks? Since I have very little time left, I will move fast. If you just look at this map, we have sometimes the feeling that Africa depends very much on ODA. But basically, it's not the case for half of the countries. Basically, those countries for which, yes, ODA still matter a lot are precisely LDCs. You observe that there is quite a bunch of LDCs in West Africa. Yes, all those ones have quite an important ODA. Here on the left of the slide, we mention again some key problems. I would very much insist on the fact that aid should be far more than it is now spent to strengthen the capacities of countries to mobilize more domestic resources. So strengthen their fiscal policies, strengthen their banking system in order to better mobilize savings, particularly in rural areas, particularly from women who don't have that much access sometimes to the banking system. Well, here in the same spirit, you just observe again that you have on the right of the slide quite a number of countries which have really capacity regarding taxation. And if really, I would say, expenditures are not contributing to poverty alleviation, it's because really there is a lack of political will. On the left, on the contrary, you have quite a number of countries here, approximately 20, which are really countries in which the capacities to raise taxes is pretty limited. And the issue there is quite challenging. Now, I would say if you think in terms of local and up to the international, well, number one, at the local level now, the OECD has launched last year, if I remember, a regional initiative, the African Tax Administration Forum, ATAF, which is being implemented by the Center for Tax Policy. And there is a lot of potential here to strengthen the capacities of local administration. At the higher level, at the global level, there is the more participation in the international tax dialogue. And regarding transnational, it's quite important to refer to the studies from countries in order to see what are really the profit which transnational can get from one country compared to others. And there is all this issue of transfer pricing, which is constantly repeated. And since time is up, well, I just